If you've been told that hard work is the only variable between you and a successful life, I have a rather uncomfortable medical diagnosis for your ego. You've been consuming a toxic diet of industrial-age propaganda. In fact, if you are constantly pushing yourself to grind through the sheer force of will, you aren't being a high performer. You are actually performing a slow-motion biological sabotage on your most valuable asset, your brain. We've been raised in a society that worships the hustle, but in the world of neuropsychology, the people we label as lazy are often the ones with the most powerful hardware. If you don't solve the mismatch between your high-speed intellect and your low-fidelity work habits, you won't just feel unproductive. You will experience chronic cerebral exhaustion, leading to a permanent state of burnout where your brilliant ideas never leave the simulation phase. Welcome to Cognitive Blueprint. I'm not here to give you another cliché speech about waking up at 4 a.m. to prove your worth. Today, we are going to dismantle the laziness myth under the cold clinical light of neuroscience. I'm going to decode why your high IQ is actually the primary cause of your procrastination, and I'll prove that laziness is often just evolutionary efficiency gone wrong. We're moving the conversation from shame to chemistry. The reason you've struggled to just do it in the past isn't because you lack grit or discipline. It's because you are operating on a high need for cognition, or NFC system, a psychological trait where your brain is biologically wired to crave complex mental activity, but physically repulsed by mundane, low-fidelity execution. For the deep-thinking introvert, or the scanner brain with 50 open tabs regarding quantum entanglement and 18th century gardening, the world is a non-stop series of open loops.
Here's the paradox. The smarter you are, the more your brain simulates. While a specialist just picks up the shovel and digs, your brain is busy calculating the soil density, the ergonomic angle of the handle, and the historical significance of the hole you are about to make. Psychologists call this analysis paralysis, but neurologically, it's a massive metabolic tax. Your prefrontal cortex, the expensive, high-maintenance CEO of your brain, burns through its glucose supply just thinking about the work before you've even moved a muscle. You aren't lazy, you are cerebrally overdrawn. You feel exhausted at 10 a.m., not because you've worked hard, but because your internal simulator has already run 10,000 versions of the day, and frankly, the CEO is ready for a nap. To understand this, we have to look inside the black box of what I call the simulation trap. Think of your brain like a high-end computer. Your intelligence is the processing power, but your working memory is the RAM. For the multitasker and the polymath, your RAM is permanently cluttered with attention residue from a dozen different interests. When you face a boring task, your brain hits a cognitive gap. It asks, is the reward of filing this tax return worth the metabolic cost of shutting down my simulation about urban beekeeping? The answer from your amygdala, the brain's primitive survival center, is almost always no. This triggers a biological strike. Your brain flushes your dopamine levels, making the task feel physically painful. The aha moment here is realizing that your laziness isn't a character flaw, it is a resource allocation strategy. Your brain is hardwired to conserve energy for deep problems, and it views shallow, repetitive work as a threat to its survival. You have been blaming your willpower when you should have been blaming your architecture. The turning point is accepting that you cannot willpower your way out of a high IQ simulation. You have to learn how to bypass the CEO and rig the chemistry in your favor.
So if we accept the reality that your laziness is actually a high-level metabolic defense mechanism, the question shifts from how do I stop being lazy to how do I perform an arbitrage on my own brain? We need to stop treating your intellect as a burden that needs to be disciplined and start treating it as a high-powered engine that needs a very specific kind of ignition sequence. The secret to being a productive, smart person isn't to work harder, It's to use a process I call the Cerebral Leverage Sequence. This is a tactical protocol designed to bypass the simulation trap and trick your expensive prefrontal cortex into handing over control to the low-cost, high-speed workers in your basal ganglia. We are moving from the exhausting manual transmission of overthinking into the automatic transmission of high-fidelity execution. The sequence begins at minute 0 with what I call the simulation export. Since we know your brain is currently redlining its RAM by running 10,000 scenarios of how a task could fail or evolve, we have to perform a literal data dump. Grab a physical piece of paper, not a digital one because your visual cortex needs the tactile analog anchor we've discussed, and write down every what-if currently clogging your RAM. If you're worried about that 14th century gardening project or the ergonomic angle of the shovel, put it on the page. By externalizing the simulation, you are providing your amygdala with psychological closure. You are sending a biological signal to the CEO that the data is safe and doesn't need to be actively refreshed. This instantly drops your metabolic tax and clears the path for the next move. Once the RAM is flushed, we move into the 80-20 pruning phase from minute 2 to 5. This is where you leverage your high intelligence for what it was actually designed for: strategy. Instead of looking at your to-do list like a mountain of laundry, look at it like a chessboard. Ask yourself, what is the magic 20% of this task that will generate 80% of the result? If you're a scanner with a dozen paths, you need to identify the one subtask that makes the others irrelevant or easier. We're looking for the lead domino. By using your IQ to find the shortcut rather than the struggle, you are rewarding your evolutionary drive for efficiency. You aren't being lazy, you are being a neural architect. You are pricking the most effective point on the map to trigger a cascade of progress.
Now, we hit the most critical part of the sequence, the low-fidelity sprint from minute 5 to 10. This is where you will encounter the hidden obstacle, what I call the minute 8 elite boredom. Just as you start making progress, your smart brain will wake up, look at what you're doing, and scream, "This is beneath us. We should be researching quantum entanglement, not filing this invoice." This is the biological trap. This is the moment your prefrontal cortex tries to stage a coup to regain control of your energy. To bypass this, you must lower your standards to the absolute floor. Perform the task at a speed that makes it impossible to be smart or perfect. You are forcing the behavior into the basal ganglia, the autopilot center that doesn't care about complexity. It only cares about the script. If you can push through that itch of boredom at minute 8, you reach the state of cognitive ease, where the work finally begins to glide. Imagine your life 30 days from now. You are no longer the lazy genius who is haunted by the gap between their potential and their reality. You have become the person who connects the history of technology to the future of the market, and you do it with zero friction. You wake up and your prefrontal cortex is clear because you no longer rely on it to carry the weight of your simulations. You've moved from being a distracted scanner to becoming a system master, someone who understands that their intelligence is a tool for leverage, not a reason for paralysis. This shift in identity, from lazy to efficient architect, is the final piece of the cognitive blueprint. You are no longer fighting your biology. You are the one rigging the game in your own favor. The self-blame ends tonight. You weren't meant to be a worker bee. You were designed to be a bridge builder between different worlds of knowledge. To help you install this cerebral leverage sequence and identify your high IQ triggers, I've put together a resource called the Lazy Genius Blueprint. It's a minimalist PDF that maps out the exact simulation export scripts and 80-20 pruning formulas for your specific brain type. You can grab it at the link below. I want to hear from you in the comments. What is the smartest excuse your brain has ever used to avoid a dumb task? Let's dismantle those simulations together.
And if you're ready to see how this newfound leverage transforms your entire career architecture, you need to watch our next video on the M-shaped professional, where we take your broad curiosity and turn it into a specialist's worst nightmare. Reclaim your leverage. Build the bridge. You are watching Cognitive Blueprint.